I don't know what season it was, but just somebody said something about, are we going to do an episode where Malcolm loses his virginity or Reese loses her virginity, and everyone just goes, they've already lost their virginity. We're like, what? Oh, okay.
Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Can you repeat? Yes, no, 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 maybe. Life is unfair.
Hello and welcome to Yes, No, Maybe. My name is Ryan.
My name is Willa.
We are brother and sister, and this is a podcast where we discuss, debate, and relate to the widely seen and underappreciated 2000 sitcom Malcolm in the Middle. We have another very special interview. Today on the podcast we have producer, writer, director Alex Reid, who is a huge driving force in Malcolm in the Middle, and also known for his work on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Mindy Project, Michael J. Fox Show, The Middle, and Malcolm in the Middle.
The better middle show. Sorry.
In our opinion.
In our opinion.
We don't have a podcast about the middle.
I think Eden has a podcast about the middle with Brock, who played her friend on the show.
It's called Maybe No Yes. It's called Maybe No Yes,
Yeah,
and it's about the middle.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
Thanks,
Thank you for being
Alex.
here. We're super psyched.
I appreciate you guys. I mean, even before the revival, it's just nice that someone's out there keeping this show talked about, because I do agree with you that it's underappreciated. I think people forget about what TV was like before this show came along. There was very few single camera shows, and the ones that came. And I heard some of Linwood's interview with you. And that's one of the reasons I want to come on here and rebut all the lies he told you. But he was right that the single cameras that came before Malcolm it just felt flat without a laugh track. And there were some brilliant shows. There was a show called Bakersfield PD that they only did like a season and a half of on Fox, and it was brilliant, but it was just, you had to really pay attention because there was no laugh track to tell you where the jokes were, and it didn't have the pop and flash that Malcolm ultimately did, so it failed. But it was very smart of Linwood and Todd Holland to create the look and feel of the show the way they did.
Yeah, why do you think like Malcolm was the single camera comedy that got the formula right? Like what you mentioned, a kind of pop and a flash, but
yeah, well, I think also just in general, whether it's a single cam or multicam, I think you can't go wrong with a show about family, because it's the one thing we all have in common in one way or another. And even someone as specifically unusual as Linwood's family, there's stuff in there that you can relate to. And, people all the time would say, that's my mom, or I have a brother just like that. And we brought things from our own childhood into the show. I mean, it wasn't just Linwood. So it was people there was a full spectrum of childhoods that were represented. I mean, they all had to kind of fit into the filter of, what the show was. But I think that helped keep it relatable. But
Totally.
But just the energy of it, really, it's interesting too, because the way that show hit the air it was just this perfect storm, in that it was a mid-season show. This guy Doug Herzog was the head of Fox at the time, and he was given that job because he's the guy who basically discovered the South Park guys and put them when he was running Comedy Central. And he was a rare executive who, if he liked an idea, he didn't try to change it. And he read Linwood's script, and I think the only thing he told Linwood is, you should have the dad talk more. I think Linwood probably talked about he wanted the dad to be remote and hardly ever speak. And I believe Linwood told me Herzog said that and just said, it's going to get old if the dad never talks. And so he's there, and then Tracy Katsky Boomer was at the studio along with Gail Berman, and they totally let Linwood operate, and they trusted him creatively. And so then we start making these episodes, and it hasn't aired yet, and everything Fox had for the fall just died. I mean, it just was, and I think by the time we got on the air, Herzog had already been fired. They really didn't give him a very long leash. And then they brought in this guy, Sandy Gruschow, who really is not a creative guy, but he's was the best promoter in the business. So all he had was Malcolm in the Middle. So he just promoted the shit out of it. And it just everybody knew about it. And it helped that it got really good reviews. But it just was really in the public consciousness. And also it helped, that's back before streaming and, cable wasn't doing original programming. So there weren't a lot of options on where you went to for your TV viewing. So,
Yeah, some people are that we've interviewed have from the show have kind of balked at the underappreciated line in our intro, but I think it is that idea that audiences weren't used to this style, and now we take it so for granted. But Malcolm really did forge a path there, and it's just and the thing also that we like to talk about a lot is it's hilarious. It's a hilarious show, but it also has this heart and this family, the relatable family drama stuff that's real and clearly pulling from your guys' actual family stories. I think gives it a little bit more weight sometimes.
Yeah, well, the heart thing was new to me because I was a relatively new writer, and I came from the world. I was a stand-up in San Francisco, and then moved down to LA and wrote some spec scripts and got hired, but I was always just jokes, just making funny jokes. And the more experienced writers would bring up stuff well, what's the emotional underpinnings of this? And I would just be like, shut up, old man, it's jokes. And then the first episode of Malcolm that I wrote was Lois's birthday. And I was, when I wrote that, the clown fight scene, all I was thinking when I wrote it, and we had already, I think when we were outlining it, somebody had pitched the Kenny Rogers song to play over it. And so, but I was just thinking about, this is hilarious. And one other side note is because I had never written single camera before, and Linwood said, hey, you got to spell everything out. Don't just say the kids and the clowns get into a fight. Get specific. This punch gets thrown. This thing happens. And I heard him laughing in his office, and he called me in there, and he said, this is the most violent thing I've ever seen in my life, and there's no way we can do all of this. So, I mean, I had Dewey with a baseball bat hitting a clown on top of his feet and shattering all the bones in his... I went for it. Yeah, I totally went for it. So he just said, dial back the violence, because this is too much. But anyway, I'm just thinking when I'm writing it, I just want it to be funny. And then when Linwood finished his cut of the episode, he brought it in on a VHS tape. That's how long ago it was. And we watched it in the writer's room, and I almost started crying. I was so moved by it. And I'm I'm laughing and I'm crying, and it was such a sweet spot that is very hard to hit, where you make people laugh out loud, but they can also feel their heart growing, Yeah. And so that was really that really affected me as far as what I really liked in writing after that. And I think sometimes I leaned too far to the emotional side and forgot to be funny, but that scene is just I think perfection. And it also, the way Ken shot it and going to slow motion, and it was just and I think it's one of Ken's favorite episodes too.
He mentioned it. Yeah,
it's that scene's so iconic.
Did it not feel sad when you were writing it? I mean, did it surprise you more? I don't know, was it their performances or you know what I mean?
It's weird. I didn't come from a horrible childhood, but I came from a kind of not a great childhood, not a happy childhood, and it was more just on me. But I don't have these super fond memories of what family is. So I'm all for leaning into how fucked up it can be. And when the kids are just being assholes, I'm like, yeah, kids are assholes. And that's another thing that we rejected on the show was this trite thing of out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom. You know, like the parents are all caught up in stuff and they can't see the forest for the trees, but the kid in his innocence sees through to the truth. And it's like, no, kids are selfish, stupid assholes. Yeah. And as they age, they become stupid and assholey in different ways. But it's just, and the only person who could love them is their parents. And they love them, you know, they die for them. But to the people on the outside, it's just like, wow, that kid's an asshole. And so I loved that we leaned into that. You know, I don't remember what episode it was in, but the one where the boys are playing baseball in the house, and somebody hits a ball and it smashes a glass frame picture or something, and Reese is like, crap. And they're freaking out, and then they can't decide who won, so they go again, and they break something else, and it's like the first time it never happened. Reese again goes, crap! Like he can't believe. It's like he has no memory of something that happened 20 seconds before. So I just loved how, you know, stupid they were, and not like Homer Simpson dumb. They were just kids who weren't fully developed yet mentally or physically. So
short-term memory.
I also just want to say, when we're talking about sort of like the comedy versus the heart, Lois's birthday has one of my favorite moments in the whole show, which is, and like every so often, because we're rewatching the show, right, and we're in season 3 right now, and I've seen the show a million times, but not with this sort of like analytical lens where we spend like an hour talking about each one. And every so often you get to a moment where you're like reminded why this is such a singular like program. And when Willa said the show has a lot of heart, like it certainly does, but what I love about the show is that it's never like schmaltzy about it. And I think a great moment that highlights that is in Lois's birthday, that conversation that Hal has with Lois, I think at the batting cages, where he's basically like, I can't change. You know, you kind of just have to accept it. Accept me, and this is who I am. Yeah,
and he's like, oh, honey, we're never gonna remember.
It's such a rug pull moment that's so emotionally honest, and I think it's so emblematic of a show that's so full of that. Can you talk about that conversation?
That speech was pretty much all Linwood. Like, you know, you go off with a fairly detailed outline, and there's jokes in there that, you know, came from everybody, but he that was almost dictated word for word by him before I went off to write the script, and it was just, you know, and it was just pure him. My favorite thing, other than the clown fight, and I think I'd put it up against anything he did in the whole series, is from the moment that Hal realizes he also forgot her birthday, and he gets up from the bed and is, I'm going to let those kids have it. And he's clearly panicking. And then he smashes his shitty watch because the alarm didn't remind him. And he goes out and yells at the boys. And then he flips the quiet with the loud.
Yes.
I would put it up against anything he did. And I don't think he... I don't think he submitted it that year for his Emmy thing, and I was like, "Oh my God! Just show that clip." It's just comedy genius on his part. I mean, when I was writing it, I thought it was funny, but he just took it to a whole other level, and the way Ken shot it also obviously helped elevate it.
I've neglected to mention this in the intro, but just your specific involvement in Malcolm in the Middle, where you're a producer and executive producer, co-executive producer, writer, and director of 2 episodes. You wrote Bowling, which you won an Emmy for, which is arguably the best episode of the show. Certainly Thank up you. There. Lois's birthday, The Bully, Carnival, Book Club, Family Reunion, all classics.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I go on Reddit sometimes. I know we're not supposed to talk about Reddit here. But somebody will like put a thing of like name your top 10 episodes or whatever. And Family Reunion is almost always near the top, and I like that episode fine. I think, but it's not. It's of the ones I wrote. It's not near the top. I think people just respond to that thing at the end when they drive the golf cart through the
I was gonna
party.
say,
And,
the visual, but
Yeah.
also the fact that they're going to bat so heavily for Lois and for it's like the boys flipping their nature and defending their parents so hard.
Yeah.
The
is-
same way that they do in Lois's birthday.
Yeah, is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
like something people respond to, I think, and
Yeah.
I mean that I did when I was watching it.
And that was also kind of a recurring theme in the show, is that those boys would screw each other over in a heartbeat. But when there was an outside threat, they would immediately band together and defend. And
Yeah.
that happened throughout the show. But
Right.
yeah, it's funny because when you talk about bowling, when that season was season 2 of that show is the best season of anything I've ever been involved in. I don't think there's a clunker in season 2. Later the show's been on a while. We definitely it was a little more erratic, but that season 2 is incredible. But anyway, you get to this point in the season where the studio reaches out and says, hey, you have to pick an episode you want to submit for the awards or whatever. And I was outside the building talking to one of the other writers, and we were discussing it. And Linwood happened to walk by right as I said, I think I'm going to submit Lois's birthday. And he just spun on me and he said, you are out of your mind if you don't submit bowling. That is that show pops. People notice that show. People are going to remember that show. That's the show. And it wasn't even, he hadn't even finished editing it yet. So but
Wow.
it was just like, he knows more than I do. So I changed it, and glad I did. Lois's birthday just has such a special place in my heart because, like I said, it really made me feel something, which was a first when I was watching TV comedy.
Definitely. Ryan and I were debating which, I mean, it's kind of a what happened at the end of The Sopranos type question, but which storyline in bowling is the actual reality? Like, which one
What's
is
canon?
what's
I
canon?
have an answer.
Yeah.
Well, I might have heard you say this, that that it's the side where. Oh wait, no, that doesn't work. Somebody was saying that one particular side was it because we see the bowling ball in the garage in the revival. But I think the bowling ball's in both stories. So
Yeah, the girly one, the one that
says
Connie
Connie.
one. Is it in both stories? I think it might just be in the Lois one.
Lois's one. I mean,
well,
Lois is the one that shows
you know
up.
what? I think you're right, because when Malcolm doesn't even try on the other side, he just throws it without even trying, and he bowls a strike. I think that wasn't
Right.
the Connie ball. But
Right,
hang on
right.
one
Right.
second. I want to show you something. My agent gave me this. This is the actual.
No way.
Oh,
Yeah.
that
Oh my
is
gosh.
so cool.
So cool.
Yeah, my agent
Wow,
went
that's
to my agent went to the prop guy. Hang on. Yeah, it's heavy. My agent went to the prop guy and said, "Hey, can I get that bowling ball for Alex?" And he said, "It's in some prop house out in Van Nuys." And he was nice enough to go out there and dig through it and find the bowling ball and give it to my agent.
That's so nice.
That's so
yeah,
sweet.
I have
Wow.
that. Yeah.
So that's got to be the canon one then.
Yeah.
I mean, we always thought Lois because I was like, I think Lois would be the one to be like, I'm going to take the kid. Like, I feel like that's the more likely scenario.
Yeah.
But also
yeah.
it shows up in clips. I think it's Clip Show, maybe the one
Yeah.
where they're showing previous episodes. That's the version that shows up in that
In
episode.
Clip Show?
I
Okay.
think that was like my technical answer
That
for
was
why I
your-
thought it was
yeah.
canon.
Well,
This
I
is
think,
as nerdy as we can get.
yeah. I don't think the Connie ball was in the Lois side. I mean, in the Hal side. I think.
Damn.
Yeah, because he wasn't being pressured like he was by Lois. But,
Yeah.
but,
So Hal never got to bowl that almost perfect
No.
game. That means
it's almost.
maybe that's
yeah.
better for his psyche that he never had to go through that. We were, reading up about you, and it's a funny coincidence that you started in electrical engineering, and then you moved to San Francisco to do that, and then you
Yeah.
pivoted to comedy. We
Yeah.
grew up in San Francisco. Our mom and both our parents are in tech. Our mom is an electrical engineer,
wow.
and so we grew up with tech and Silicon Valley, like so ingrained in our lives, but then we have such an appreciation for comedy. So weird overlaps there. And I was just wondering like what that pivot was like for you, like going from tech into comedy and that time in your life.
Yeah, well, I was down in Silicon Valley and working for a company this is like before, I was in tech, but this was before the internet. So I couldn't really research this company before I moved across the country to go work for it. And then I got there and found out that they were having it was weird. They brought in a bunch of new college hires and then were firing all these senior people. So we were being brought in as like the cheap replacements. And so every Friday we'd have to go to a goodbye luncheon and everybody's looking at us like, why are you here? And why are we saying goodbye to Marty? It was really a weird time. But anyway, it just hit me pretty fast that a office job long term was not for me. And San Francisco's stand-up scene was starting to really take off. The first time I went up there, I went up to try. We were going to go up and see some headliner. I don't even remember who, but we got there on a Sunday night, and it was an open mic, and at the Punchline. So we just stayed and watched it. And when I saw how horrible half the stand-ups were, this like door opened up in my brain and was just like, you could do better than that person. I mean, and so I just started trying to write some jokes and stuff. And a few months later, weirdly, I went to the Punchline, and the very first time I went, I got a spot, which is like in retrospect was like unheard of. And I did pretty good. And then the next time I went up, I really got too far over my skis, and I just said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to go up with a plan. I'm just going to go up and talk and see what happens. And it was a shit show. And,
I've done that.
Horrible. Yeah, there are people who can do it, but I learned I'm not.
Well, because I come from improv too, so I was like, oh, I can just improv, like, duh, it's easy. Yeah. And then I got up there, I was like, it's not the same at all. And
you're so dependent on the audience too at that point too, if you're going to do crowd work. Anyway, I started doing sets and doing open mics, and I'd drive up to San Francisco every night and do a set, and then drive, get home at like 1 a.m. and drag myself out of bed and go to this job I hated. And and when I eventually started getting paid gigs, and I quit my job, and it was interesting because when I quit, the people that were my age were saying to me, okay, good luck with that. Hope you know what you're doing. And then these guys in their 50s would come in and shut the door and just say, oh my God, I wish I had done something like this when I was your age. I just, it's too late now, but I'm tormented by what if I had, tried to be a photographer or done something else. So that made me feel pretty good about my choice. And I just met my wife, and really didn't want to be on the road all the time, and started writing spec scripts. And this guy, Jack Gallagher, who was, he lives in Sacramento now, but he was a San Francisco comic at one point. He had done a one-man show that he got a development deal, and they did a pilot, and it went to series. And I gave him a Roseanne spec that I wrote, and he liked it, and he gave it to the showrunners, and they liked it, and they hired me. And then from then on, I worked. That show didn't make it, and then I worked on all that for a year on Nickelodeon, and then I went back to network comedies and stayed in that world. But I was on like 3 or 4 multicams before I went on Malcolm, and I didn't really fully process what the difference was until I walked on the set, and it was like, where are the bleachers? Where's the audience? Where's the warm-up guy? And it was just, it moved at a different pace, and it's like, oh wow, this is like making a movie. This is really cool.
How did you hear about Malcolm? Like, what was?
I look back on this one thing where you make a decision and it changes your whole life. And I was on a show that had gotten canceled in like November. And back then there was like really there was staffing season, and it was like, March, April, that's when you go out and do meetings. And if you get hired, you're good. And if you don't, it's like you got to wait another year till you, get on a show. And my agent called me and said, there's this animated show, and they really liked this script that we gave them of yours, and they want to meet you today. And I was dead. I had the flu. I could barely get out of bed. And I said, I don't think I can do it today. And my agent said, they're hiring somebody this week, and they want to hire you. They just want you to come in and, let them see that you're not an asshole, and they're going to hire you. And I went into that meeting, and it was Matthew Carlson had created the show, who ended up eventually writing on Malcolm. And I walk in, and Linwood's in there laying on the couch. He was writing it with, it was Matthew's show, but Linwood, they went way back, and he was just lying on the couch. And it's like, okay. Linwood had already written the pilot, and as we were working together, he sold it, and then it was at UPN for a while, and then it got moved to Fox, and he left to go make the pilot. And then he came back and showed us the pilot, and our jaws were just on the floor. I just couldn't believe how good it was. And I'm a huge They Might Be Giants fan, so the fact that he put Pencil Rain in there, I was just like, oh my God, this show is speaking to me. That was that. And then I stayed. The animated show was this thing called God, the Devil, and Bob, and it was James Garner as the voice of God, Robert Downey Jr. as the devil, and French Stewart, who had been on Third Rock from the Sun, as this guy Bob, and they're kind of fighting over his soul. And in the pilot, God and the devil go into a bar, and God drinks a light beer, and parts of the country lost their mind. And they went to the local... Because
they thought he'd be more of a dark beer guy.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the Guinness? So anyway, it was really almost like dead in the water before it ever got on the air, which is unfortunate. But while we had written all the scripts and we were just doing animation stuff, giving notes on animation, and Linwood came back to Matthew and said, hey, can Alex, you guys aren't really working full time right now, can Alex come work part time on Malcolm? It was refreshing to write something and then see it on the screen and see it even better than you were picturing it in your mind. And that's not always the case. So that was really nice. But one thing that was interesting about that time was the writer's room was just basically Linwood's office. He didn't have his own office. He just had this giant room, and his desk was in the corner, and then we had some couches and a TV monitor and a whiteboard. And so we heard all of his phone calls, and he got a call at one point from the studio saying, the show hadn't aired yet, but they've been seeing cuts, and the studio said, we just heard from the network, and they want you to bring the oldest brother home from the military academy and have him be in the house, because they don't want it to be schizophrenic. And Linwood had no capital to burn at all. I mean, he had he hadn't created a lot of other hit shows before this. He'd been working forever, but he really had no capital to burn. And he just said, I'm not doing that show. And if they want that show, they can fire me and get somebody else to do it. And all the writers are going, whoa! They couldn't believe that he took that stance, but he didn't even flinch. And, Linwood does not lack self-confidence, and he just knew that he was right and that he had a good show, and the network backed down, because it was such a personal show. He just wasn't gonna mess with that. He wasn't gonna. You start taking all these notes, and then it just gets diluted into something else, and it doesn't. You don't even recognize what you liked about it in the first place. So.
Totally.
Can you talk about how the writer's room operated for Malcolm specifically? Like, were you guys was there a breaking the story of the seasons, and then you guys kind of got assigned episodes, or how did it work out?
He came in, and he in his head he already had like 8 show ideas, and like Red Dress and Home Alone and all that stuff. So that was that season. But after that, he would maybe come in with like 2 or 3 ideas, but we would spend a lot of pre-production just like talking around like, okay, what went right and what went wrong the season before? What do we want to lean into? And people would maybe bring up stuff from that had happened in their childhood that he might think had potential. When an idea seemed like it could be an episode, we would start talking about it. And I heard Linwood talk about this, and it's like there was never been another show that had this leeway. We could do a 3-act or a 2-act, and we weren't locked into either one. So we'd start talking about it, and it's like, I think this is a 2-act, or it might be a 3-act. And then you got to think of what the tent poles are of, what the act below is of each one of those acts. And then you write towards those tent poles to fill out the scene. But it would be like a 1 or 2 sentence description of each scene. And then at that point, if production hadn't started, Linwood would be in the room and he would kind of run things. And we would do an incredibly detailed outline on the board. I mean, where you're writing like the letters of space. It got so ridiculous. I swear to God, the writer's assistant brought in a pair of binoculars so he could read from his desk like what we were writing on the board, so he could put it into the document. And before we started outlining it, Linwood had already told the writer whose script, this is going to be your script, so pay extra close attention. And then once production started, it got a little more complicated. People will challenge this, but I think running a single camera sitcom is one of the most difficult jobs if you're doing it by yourself, if you don't have a partner, or it's because you get pulled in 3 different directions at once. You've got to do editing, you've got to be on the set because comedy is fragile and you can't trust the director. I say this as a director. You can't trust the director to get every single joke the way you want it and every performance the way you want it. And you got to be in the room generating scripts. And so his time became very valuable and hard to get his attention. Whoever was going to write the script, they basically more or less ran the room. If they were really a lower level writer, the co-EPs would kind of help nudge them. And then Linwood would come in, and sometimes it'd be like he'd just come in at lunch and he's just eating lunch and we're, pitching to him. And I don't know how he didn't just have a complete mental collapse. I mean, it's just the strain that he was under was incredible. But anyway, so we're pitching it, and then the worst thing that could happen is you'd pitch a scene and he wouldn't say anything about it, and he would just go, "Okay, what's next?" And you're like, "Oh." And then we talk about the next scene. He's like, "Okay," and then he would just very slowly get up and walk over to the whiteboard and pick up an eraser and just erase a giant swath of what we've been working on. And it would be like, oh, shit, okay. And then he would tell us why it didn't work, or it didn't work for him. And then we would go back to the drawing board, literally, and reconceive the scenes. And then once we had an outline that he had signed off on, writer goes off. Sometimes you don't have to be in the room. It depends on how pressed for time, how urgently we needed the script. But frequently you had to be in the writer's room too and help break the next episode. And then at night, and on the weekends, write the script and turn it in. And then you would get notes on the first draft and go off and write a second draft. And then it was the rooms. He would go through the script in the room and just real quick go through and say, okay, let's beat this joke. This moment doesn't work. Let's fix that. And then he'd go back down to the set or go into editing, and we would, keep working on it. So, yeah. And it took its toll on him. After season 5, he just said, I can't do this anymore the way I'm doing it. And I think Tracy also just said, you can't do this anymore the way you're doing it. So he just had a hard out. I think he wasn't going to the set. And so a writer would be on set. And that was terrifying because you've got to try to get what Linwood wants. And sometimes you're not sure what Linwood wants. And you can't just say, let's do it every conceivable way, and then one of them will be something he likes, because then he would never finish shooting. And Linwood would be in the writer's room until 5, and then he would just leave. And the other thing that took the toll was most shows that I ever worked on, single camera shows, when production started, you'd have like maybe 6 scripts, maybe 7. We would have like 11 or 12. So we came back, our pre-production started way before everybody else's, and then his post-production lasted longer than most people's. So there was an overlap. He would still be editing the season before when the writers would come back to do the next season. Wow. And so the way he tried to keep his sanity was we would generate outlines. Nobody would go off the script, but we would generate outlines for 8 or 9, 10 scripts, and then he would go to Hawaii for 2 weeks with Tracy and just like decompress, and that was his he had a 2-week vacation, and that was it, and the rest of the year he was working nonstop. Wow. And then he would come back, and during that 2 weeks, everybody went off and wrote their scripts, and so it was not a sustainable situation. I mean, there's nobody could have held up with that, and especially when everything is just so specific in your head. For him, he can't just say, "Yeah, just come up with something." I'm sure it'll be great. It's like he's right. And that's any good show. You feel a point of view, and if it's just written too much by committee, it just feels like it's nothing. And and there would be times in episodes where he would just kind of go into his own and lay out the whole thing, like he laid out Hal's speech to Lois at the batting cage. Right. There's this, I don't even remember what episode it was in. It might have been Family Picnic, when Malcolm goes off with this girl and he gets poison ivy. Mm-hmm. Yes. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, and Company Picnic, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and he professes his affection for her, and she just gives this like 3-minute opus about how you are so fucked up as a person and broken, and it just like poured out of him, and it was just like, this is something he's been sitting on for a while, because it just came out so fluently. So there would be moments like that, but a lot of it was us pitching stuff and then him just saying yes or no, and then also us bringing our own childhood experiences to the room.
In terms of like who he decided would write what script, were there certain writers where he's like, oh, this is a Hal episode and you are the guy that I like to write? Were you guys kind of like, did you have your niches a little bit?
If we did, that was his secret. He didn't really say, hey, you're the... Gotcha. But I ended up with the bowling episode because the way season 1 happened was so weird. We had finished shooting it, and like right by and then the thing went on the air, and it was huge because Fox gave it their best time slot. They promoted the hell out of it, and it did giant numbers. And Fox came back and said, we want 3 more episodes to put onto this season. So we rushed back. Yeah, we rushed back, and then they said, and then the plan was, okay, we'll write these 3 episodes, and then we'll just stay here and write the next season. And the next season was 24 episodes. Right. So we did 27 episodes without a break, and we realized we were really running on empty when we celebrated the same PA's birthday twice in the same season. It was just like, when are we ever going to get out of here? So we never really had a moment to like stop and catch our breath. About halfway through season 2, Linwood said, let's just take a break. We're going to go off the lot, and we'll do a 2-day retreat. And he rented a freestanding room at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And he went there and he spent the night, but we went there both days, and we just talked big picture and like zoomed out, and he said, let's try to think of other stuff. And I thought it was my idea. There's been some contention that maybe it wasn't my idea, but what happened was I had written a movie script and got 15 pages into it and then just lost interest in it. where that was like a sliding doors thing, where a guy is at a diner, and on one side he orders, he has a second cup of coffee, and in the other one he doesn't, and then he goes out and he's into two different worlds. And so the idea of this came up. I think I brought it up. I don't know. But anyway, because I
Hey,
had...
you're saying it on the podcast, so it's true.
Okay. And so, thank you. We
Yeah.
have validation.
Exactly.
And because I had written this thing, he's like, okay, you can do it. And then the other thing I brought up, because he was like, what is something you don't really see in comedies? And I was thinking back to when I was a kid and I was watching reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And more than once, they did scary episodes of that show. There was one where he was at a cabin and he thought there was like a ghost or something. And I remember watching as a little kid and I was like, I'm supposed to be laughing. I'm scared right now. What is this? That's how we ended up doing Carnival. And I don't think Carnival was my idea, just that we should do a scary episode. But anyway, I ended up doing that one too. And there were other ideas. And then every year we would try to do at least one episode that was, outside the box in some way or another. And I don't remember what the play was, but Eric Kaplan during the hiatus had been to New York and had seen this play where each act took place over the same time frame, but if in the first act somebody shoots somebody, in the second act people are talking and then they hear the gunshot, and then so he pitched this thing where each act was in a different part of the house, and these girls, foreign girls, somehow ended up at the house, and the boys were after the girls. And we were just like, Linwood would leave the room and we would just turn to Eric and go, you fucking asshole. This thing is unbreakable. What did you do to us? And Eric is an interesting guy. He's like, he has a PhD from Harvard in philosophy, and he's just operates on another wavelength that we're not capable of. So to him, it was very simple, but the rest of us we had steam coming out of our ears trying to figure this thing out. And ultimately it worked, but God, it was a lot of work to get it into a script shape.
Wait, did that episode?
What episode? Yeah,
we're on season 3 right now. Did it do the thing that you talked about? It sounds like it's like the elephant, the Columbine movie, where it's like the same time period.
Yeah, not quite as dark as that movie. But,
they really should have explored that in the show.
Talking about scary episodes,
Yes.
Here's one for you.
yes, that would be scary. I think it was because the very last season, Linwood really didn't have any input other than the 4 episodes that he directed. So it wasn't. It wasn't season 7. It must have been 5 or 6, and it was so hard. It was so hard to do that episode.
That's so funny that like a writer could almost present a problem and then you guys have to like puzzle it out. That's a funny way of looking at it. I had to. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if we were better writers, we would have loved the challenge. But we were just like, you asshole! Why did you tell him this idea?
When you say that you guys would like reflect on a season and you'd be like, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what exactly? There's not really, because each episode kind of starts from the same starting place. Like, not a lot of things carry over. What kind of things are you reflecting on, and trying to improve on, and are you trying to change season by season to give each season its own, vibe or whatever?
The one that leaps to mind was after season 2, Linwood said, I'm just not buying Francis at the military academy anymore. He doesn't look like he's in high school anymore. Those stories were really hard to break, but ultimately I loved him. Spangler is one of my favorite characters ever, and one of my favorite ones to write for, because the way he spoke was so. The expression was his dialogue was very purple. It was just very overwritten, and the crack of shoe leather and all this stuff that he would say. But they were hard stories to write, and so Linwood thought it's time for Francis to move on to somewhere else, and so he ended up in Alaska, which I was never really a big fan of. I think part of the reason we didn't really have a good antagonist for Alaska. The woman who ran the logging camp,
Lavernia.
It wasn't the actor's fault. She was great, but it was. I just like I think we were so burned out after those first 2 seasons. I think we were just like, let's just make her horrible, and it wasn't. There wasn't any nuance to her at all. She was just horrible, and so I wasn't a huge fan. I definitely preferred the military academy and the Dude Ranch.
I mean, the ranch is great.
Yeah, and and then you were back to having fun. Character, Otto and Gretchen were a delight.
Yeah.
And does anybody talk to you about the story that we had to not do that we shot with?
Yes, the Unabomber cabin.
Yeah.
Steve, was that Steve Welch or was that?
That was
Ken. Ken talked to us about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what happened was we shot it, and Stacy Keach played the Unabomber, and he was on the lot because he was in another sitcom, and they were actually we were in this big building that had like offices and 3 sound stages, and we shot it, and weeks went by, and then 9/11 happened. And nobody was thinking about that episode. We just kind of forgotten about it. And Stacy Keach ran into Linwood in the building, and he goes, "Hey, you're not going to do that Unabomber story, are you?" And then that's when Linwood, "Oh my God, no! We cannot air that."
Wow.
And so then we came up with the Francis watching a soap opera in the jail thing. Which
I love that storyline.
I love
it.
that.
It was fun.
So fun.
It was really fun.
It's very like Twin Peaksy to me. Like it's unreal.
And I don't know. I can't remember his name, but that guy who played the sheriff was a brilliant comic actor. He was so dry, and I always kept my eyes peeled for that guy. I didn't see him in anything after that, but because nothing works out for Francis, right as the soap opera is about to pay off, he gets released and he gets dragged out of jail and doesn't get to see how it plays out.
Yeah, we joke about Francis like having probably the most hellish nightmare existence. Yeah. Like that he's like the poster child for not killing yourself. his life is so horrible.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, even when he visits home, it's like, you have to work at the fucking Lucky Aid under Craig. Like, Craig's,
well, it's
like,
so much of it is. So much of it is self-inflicted, He's so angry at his mother that he can't see straight. But you mentioned Craig. That was another one of my favorite characters. I just love him so much, and I knew him before the show started. When I moved down here, there was just like a bunch of comics and comic actors and stuff that were all kind of hanging out, and he was in that group, and the Higgins boys, Al Higgins too, who was a writer on the show, and Al Higgins is I need to talk about Al because next to Linwood, I think Al had the next most input for a life in a house full of boys, because that's what he grew up in. I think Al had a sister, but he had these brothers, and all they did was fuck with each other 24/7. And Al's the one who had the idea of the circle game, at the when they go to the fancy restaurant, and that was something that the brothers all did to each other. And we had never heard of that game, and
we were debating whether like Malcolm in the Middle came up with it, because we were like, we did a deep dive,
I think it was maybe like in hibernation, or it was just very low key in pockets of Iowa, which is where the Higgins boys grew up. And but then after that episode aired, people would send us newspaper clippings of like where principals had banned the game in like junior high because fights were breaking out, and it was people weren't focusing on what they should be focusing on in school. And
That's so funny.
we were playing it in the office, and I mean, it was so like people. Somebody. I can't remember the most elaborate version. Like one was like somebody took a picture of it, and it's got to be below your waist, or it doesn't count. So somebody took a picture of it below their waist, and they taped it inside the stall of a bathroom, inside the door of a bathroom stall, so that when you went and sat down and you looked up, there was a hand doing this thing, and then whoever had put it up there would wait for you to come out and then punch you in the arm. And it was relentless.
Awesome.
It came and went in waves, but we were playing that for a couple years after that episode was done.
Wow, that's so meta that like the actor who played Craig was one of the boys that one of the writers like grew up with and probably took stories from. Like, that's so funny. Weird.
Yeah. And he, I think Al took special delight in coming up with stuff that would embarrass or humiliate his brother. It's just like cruel jokes or costumes he had to wear or whatever. That was always Al picking on his older brother. But Al deserves a lot of credit for the tone of the show in the life with boys, because they were animals.
Yeah, I feel like growing up with, because I have 2 sisters, and so part of the reason I attached to the show, I think, was because I was like, it was almost like living vicariously through that family, knowing what it was like to have brothers. Yeah,
I only have a sister too, so I was it was an alien world to me, and it was. I don't know if you talked to Linwood about the lack of sports stories. Did you talk to him about that?
Yeah, we did.
Actually. Well, we said that they never like watch sports or talk about like teams or anything.
That was one of our questions. We're like, there's one cold open where they're watching sports, and it made us think like, oh, this is such a boy-centric show, and they play hockey and shit like that, but like they're never like, they don't have like a team, and so we're like, do they watch sports? And it's curious that isn't a bigger part of it.
Just Linwood's just not interested in sports, so he just wasn't interested in doing sports stories. I think we did one where Hal coached the Dewey soccer team or something, but other than that, I don't. And then of course he had roller skates. They're playing street hockey, but there was not a lot of sports talk. And I remember one time I don't know what season it was, but just somebody said something about, are we going to do an episode where Malcolm loses his virginity or Reese loses her virginity? And everyone just goes, they've already lost their virginity. We're like, what? Oh, okay. We kind of blew past that storyline.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, I guess when they were getting into teenhood, like, was there stuff that you're like, let's like not talk about that?
Houseboat episode where they may or may not have sex. And,
that's true. They have like these girls' swimsuit tops with them.
Yeah.
And
I didn't come up with this. I think it was Michael Globerman came up with this beat. He'll probably be upset that I'm outing him for coming up with this joke. But when Reese produces the bikini bottom or the top or whatever, and Malcolm says, "You got that from Mom," and he goes, "If it was from Mom, would I do this?" And he just shoves his face and starts inhaling it.
Good.
That was a big moment.
would you guys like push it to the line sometimes, and you'd be like, we got it, we can't do that kind of thing?
Well, I think Linwood really appreciated the fact that this was a show that people could watch with their kids, and his kids, he had kids that were young, that were still in the house at that point, and he said, I don't want to be uncomfortable, and I don't want people watching the show to be uncomfortable, so we would find ways, because obviously Hal and Lois couldn't keep their hands off each other, and we would find ways to keep that dynamic between them alive without it getting too in your face. And we tried. I think we were all conscious of that, of not going too far. I mean, maybe Reese sticking his face in that bikini was across the line, but it sure made me laugh, that's for sure.
When the original series ended, were you one of the people that were like, let's do a revival? Like, Bryan Cranston has talked about wanting to do it. Was that
It's
something
so
you'd heard about?
interesting to me that it really, it's true. Brian was the one driving it, and he was the guy who he has this exploding career and has the whole world, a world of choices for what to do next. And he really wanted to come back to this, which it's very touching that he, had such a affection for the character of Hal. But he reached out to me and Al Higgins, and he said, "Hey, I've been talking to Linwood. Linwood says he's tired. He's not a writer anymore. And he told me to talk to you guys, and let's come up with some ideas and pitch them to him, and then he'll sign off on something." And I'm already going, that's never going to work, because it's Linwood's got to be in on the ground floor, or it's not going to work. But anyway, and Al was working on stuff. I was working on stuff. Brian was working on stuff. We couldn't get together very often, and over the course of 2 years, we would come up with ideas, take them to Linwood, and he would shoot them down. And I don't know if he was just kind of buying time till he felt like he was really up to getting involved. And we were so desperate. I'll preface this by saying I know this is stupid, but I still love it. I had an idea that it was always going to be, there was some reason for the whole family to get together, whether it was an anniversary party or Lois's 60th birthday or something. And Malcolm didn't want to go. That was always what we were starting from. And so I had the idea that Malcolm was a tech overlord. Like, he had his giant robotics company, and he did not want to go see his family. And he had these humanoid robots in beta, and he had one that made to look like him, and he sent a Malcolm robot to this family reunion, and he's watching it unfold on monitors through the cameras in this robot's eyes, and the robot's having the best time. Like, they're having all these moments that he never had with his family, and he and Hal have this moment where they're both crying, and he's just like sitting alone in this dark room, like, that should be me, that should be me. And
damn,
he finally can't take it anymore, and he drives or flies to wherever where they are, and he gets rid of the robot and reinserts himself into the family, and then it immediately goes to shit. The second he's back in there, everything goes wrong. And I just loved it because it was him having to face that they're not the problem, I'm the problem. And then ultimately, I wasn't a part of breaking those stories, but they did get into that when he says it's not me, it's not them, it's me being around them. And so those flashbacks were great of him like scratching his own car and getting into arguments about nothing. Did Linwood talk to you about the funeral argument where they're shaking out the ashes?
No, but you loved that argument.
I commented on it. Was that to Linwood? I think it was to Ken. We interviewed Ken again like 2 weeks ago about the revival. And I just talked about how I related to that argument they were talking about like LCD TV screens. And because I was like, that's an argument I would totally have. That's
from Linwood's life. But it wasn't about LCD screens. It was about, at his mother's funeral, they're out on the woods or in a park or something, and his two brothers are arguing about which Volvo is the safest. And while they're shaking out the ashes, and they're not even they're not even conscious of what they're doing. And Linwood was just furious, and he just snatched the urn from them, and it's like, what is wrong with you people? And I fell in love with that. We would have lunch, a couple times a year, and I would always bring that up. It's like, that funeral is an indie film. You've got to just do a thing about that day. It's just such a specific, vivid world. And then he used a version of it in the revival.
Wow.
But it's fantastic. I was just busy with other stuff, and we weren't getting anywhere. And I just bowed out, and I said, look, I don't even know if I'm a writer anymore. You guys, good luck. And if you end up, if this thing gets greenlit and you have scripts, I'll be happy to come back and do punch up or do whatever you want me to do. But I've got to go do other things. And so I didn't hear back from them for a while. And then it's like, no, this is happening. And then he brought in writers from the original show to do each of these scripts with him. But I think I'm not sure how much of it was him. I think he wrote maybe the first draft on his own, and then the other writer and him, or he had the outline kind of, and then he would work with that writer to flesh it out more. I'm not sure what the process was. I really shouldn't even talk about it because I don't know what the process was. So I wasn't back until we had 4 scripts. And then Linwood had these punch-up sessions at his house and invited basically anybody who'd ever written on the show to come back, and they got paid. And we did a 2-day punch-up thing. We went through the scripts and just punched up jokes. And then he asked me to go with him to Vancouver while we were shooting it, because he said, I haven't been on a TV, or I haven't been on a soundstage in 20 years. And you've been directing a lot, and I just want a second set of eyes on stuff in case I'm missing things, or something's getting shot in a way that I'm going to be unhappy when I get into editing and I'm just not seeing it. So
Smart.
I went up there with him, and that was kind of cool because he had never been on a digital set before. When we were doing Malcolm, we were shooting it on Super 16, and he had, I think the film magazines only held like 8 minutes of stuff. So you're constantly just like, come on, we're going to run out of film. We got to wrap, get this take. And then you're on digital, and you've got like 4 hours of, and nobody ever yells cut. You just walk in while you're still rolling, and give notes, and so it's just a totally different process. So it was interesting seeing him walk in and like, whoa, what is that? And what is that guy doing? And it was, but he figured it out pretty fast, and he was, he hit the ground running. And so I definitely, was with him at Village and just saying, if you care, this thing is you're gonna be trapped in this if you don't get this coverage, or I would also kind of almost every day come in with a couple jokes that I thought maybe could be better than what was in the script, and sometimes he would say no, and sometimes he would use them. And
Nice.
And then there was never the plan that I was going to be in editing, because I love editing, but there's nothing more boring than watching someone else edit. It's just tedious. But I agreed to come in and for the first pass through everything, because since I'd been on set, maybe I could remind him of like, hey, there's this moment here that you might be interested in. But Tracy and I were both in with him, and he was open to suggestions of ours, and I felt like I was kind of a little bit more a part of that process than I really thought I would be.
Hi guys, little editor's note. We had to switch to Zoom because there was a little tech issue. The audio's a little bit funkier, and we certainly look grainier. But that's just the kind of scrappy, get it togetherness that Yes No Maybe loves to do. Enjoy. Bye.
Our final questions here were just
Can I just also say right up front,
Yeah.
I also don't know what Hal painted.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because obviously it's abstract. So
Yeah.
I
It's
really
like
don't-
what's in the suitcase of Pulp Fiction or whatever, the
Yeah,
briefcase.
exactly. I don't know exactly
It's whatever you want it to be.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Abstract. And I'm sure you also don't really know the situation with the secret toilet in the closet that people that they had.
That's actually something we're talking about, because we used to give Linwood shit about that. We had a vaporizer, and as soon as an episode was over, everything that was cool in that episode went into the vaporizer, and it was never spoken of again. Or a character we loved, they were just gone. And so it was always, that was the line in the writer's room. It's like, into the vaporizer, because
Totally.
we're never going to refer to that again. But he just wanted to keep moving forward. But I loved that story that they found a toilet in the closet.
Mhm.
That was
Good.
great. But I will always remember, that's the one where they found the Skittles game,
Yes.
right? And I don't. It's one of those things like I don't know why it's funny, but Al Higgins pitched the line from Hal of like, you could be another Chap Sanders, and like I don't know why Chap Sanders is so funny, but it just totally hit the sweet spot. That was I love that line.
It's awesome. I love that
Yeah.
storyline because like Hal is just so disturbed by the like utter lack of care that Dewey has about
Yeah.
being so great. Like he's just like he
Yes.
can't understand it.
That was an early Hal obsession story. We went through those with this the steamroller and the speed walking, uh, and we kind of touched on it. Maybe it was a cold open with the tree shredder.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but Hal would go off the deep end on something, and then as writers, we would go off the deep end and just take him to some crazy places with it.
I imagine with the cold opens, like sometimes you'd come up with an idea and you guys are just like, oh, okay, that's a cold open. Like
Yes, and sometimes there'd be busy work, like we're stuck. The the production is off on location somewhere, and we can't get in touch with Linwood, and so it's like, okay, let's just blue sky it and try to come up with some cold opens because they were almost always freestanding, and
yeah.
they got to be, when you got a good one, it was so satisfying, but they were very hard to come up with. But I was really proud of the cold open in bowling because I felt like it's sort of weirdly tied in. There was something sort of existential about it, and it was unlike any of the other cold opens we've done, I think. But
Which can you remind me what that cold open is? Is it with the pencil
it's the
on the
one where they're
ceiling?
throwing the pencil up and it
Yeah,
hits the
yeah,
ceiling.
yeah. So
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Um, but
Yeah.
I know this kind of just out of nowhere, but one of my favorite cold opens is when they played with Hal's alarm clock, so he thought he was late to work,
Yeah.
and he's in the shower shaving with his toothbrush and
Yeah.
brushing his teeth with a razor blade.
Yeah. Oh.
I know. We made like a clip out of that for our socials and like used a little moment from it. And every time I
Mhm.
watch it, I'm like, oh, like the razor going in the mouth. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
That was
fantastic.
Brian. You never had to worry about whether or not Brian was going to go for it or not. Obviously,
Mm.
there wasn't a
Right.
real razor blade in there, but the bees was the first time where we realized, oh, Brian is down for anything that we can throw at him. And we were when we were talking about that Hal's going to get hit with a bee cannon, um, like a bee cannon is a thing. We were talking about how are we going to do this? I mean, visual effects is just going to look weird, or do we make a rubber suit that looks like bees and then just put a few live bees on the rubber suit? And then Linwood just said, let's ask Brian. Maybe he's up for real bees, and he was. It
Wow.
was
Crazy.
really really impressive.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hal's like fear storyline in the revival too was something we talked a lot about. And was that something you guys like you realized before reading the revival script that he was so driven by that?
Well, I heard some of Linwood's interview, and he said that like Brian bringing up the fear angle unlocked something, but that wasn't really. I think Linwood just maybe doesn't remember or didn't read. I saw an interview with Brian back when the show was on originally, and he was saying that his character is motivated by fear,
Hmm.
and that it was something it was like a little motor that he came up with for Hal because he thought it was a nice contrast to Lois, who has no fear at all and no
Right.
self-doubt, and that it just, if they were both two imperious alphas, that wouldn't be as fun to watch, and
Hmm.
they wouldn't make as good of a couple
Definitely.
as they did.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing about that session is when he said, "There's a whole lot of little Hals in me," and I guess that's why I'm so easily confused. It wasn't meant to be, but it's totally a callback to book club when Lois leaves him to look after
Oh
the
yeah.
boys,
Oh
and
wow, I
he's
never thought
got
about that.
100 little Hals running around. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and that I wrote that episode, and I just kind of was laughing with Linwood when we were going through notes. I said, Lois has literally left the house 5 minutes ago, and he's already having a schizophrenic nervous
Yeah.
breakdown. It's a little crazy, but that was fun to shoot because we basically had one day on a soundstage with Todd Holland and Brian just putting on a different costume and coming out and doing a quick pop and shooting it and then just making that an element for like that final thing when he's like spinning around the room. And there's a Looney Tunes cartoon where a truck full of hats has a car wreck and all these hats go flying in the air and hats keep landing on people, and when the hat lands on them they would immediately take the personality of whoever would be wearing that hat. So like
Right.
if a cowboy, and that's the way Brian was. We just had this little
Hmm.
screen with all these different, yeah, try this on, try that on, and he would just come out and he was suddenly this totally different person while he's got a cowboy suit on or he's an army man or whatever. He loved diving into these micro performances.
Just like looking back, you have had such an amazing career, and we didn't even get into how you've gone into directing, and well, we're gonna have you back on and talk about more stuff. But
Sure.
but looking back on your time at Malcolm, how do you see that experience compared to everything else you've done, and what are the things that pop out to you from that time?
I'm very, very proud of it, and there's been like little references to how Linwood's very exacting, and he could be tough to work for, but you you feel that in the moment because it was just really hard to come up with stuff that passed his test, because he was so specific and exacting. But then you would go on another show where the showrunner kind of didn't really know what the show was
Hmm.
or didn't sweat the details, and you'd see the cut would come in and be like, "Wow, that could have been a lot better. I don't know
Mm.
why did we do it that way?" And and I remember I was this is kind of, I don't know why I'm sharing this story, but I was working on another show where we didn't really know what the show was, and there wasn't the attention to detail like there was on Malcolm. And I was watching TV, uh, and there were a Malcolm was on, and it was Lois's birthday. And so I stayed because I wanted to watch the clown fight. So I kept watching it. And at the very end, the fight is happening and everybody's beating the shit out of each other. And then the camera pans over to Lois watching, and Linwood cut it where this little flourish happened right when Lois blinks her eyes. And I got so emotional, like, yes, that's what a show looks like
Hmm.
when somebody cares. I mean, that was just a happy accident that he knew he could cue the song to hit that moment when she blinked. And so I really appreciated how exacting that show was and how we sweated the details. At the time, there were times I wanted to just walk into traffic. I was so exhausted and burned out. But looking back on it, you know, with working that hard comes a show one that stands the test of time. I feel like, I mean, we really
Yeah.
avoided. We try to avoid pop culture references or
Right.
talking about where they were and their clothes that the boys wore. Heidi Kaczynski, who was the costumer, uh, she really did a good job of kind of making the kids look contemporary but timeless. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you watched, there's nothing that they're wearing now that a kid wouldn't be wearing today. It was really well done. I mean, the one thing that kind of dates it, but only by its absence, is that nobody really has a cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
and the internet is not as even though the internet existed when we made the show, we just kind of didn't make it as big of a part of their lives as it certainly would be for kids today. There's a line that Spangler had where he was woken up by the sound of Tricky, who's like a trip hop guy from the 90s.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I can't believe that line's in the show. It was dated before the show that episode
funny.
ever aired. And but for the most part, we avoided that kind of stuff. And I think it was it helped make the show timeless and make it something that people can still watch. Like I will periodically hear from people who never watched it when it was on because they weren't the right age or they just weren't interested or whatever, and they've gotten into it now through their kids because their kids
Mhm.
are watching it, and that kids who I feel like kids definitely are so everything has to be about right now that they can watch something that's 25 years old and be entertained by it is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's the intentionality in the show and how like the attention to detail. It's why there's like insane people making a podcast about watching every episode.
Yes, yes.
Well,
Well,
it's weird.
well, when the show came out, there were a few attempts to capture that same lightning in a bottle, and I can't remember the name of it, but it might have been Fox. Somebody rolled out another show about a single camera show about a quirky kid with a weird family, and it sucked. And it was just like,
Yeah.
because I don't think that show was being written from somebody's point of view. It was just somebody trying to recreate a show based on somebody's point of view.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of laid there. And I think the next single cam that kind of actually did catch on was probably Scrubs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked to Tracy about how that was kind of in the the DNA of Malcolm was kind of in Scrubs a little bit, and some other shows that came after.
Yeah, they
yeah.
didn't have a laugh track, but Bill Lawrence, I think they used music a lot to kind of blow scenes. They had like music cues that were like, this is the end of a funny thing just happened and we're moving on to the next scene.
Yeah, I didn't until we started doing this podcast. I didn't really even realize how much that was like teaching me as an audience member, or like guiding me a little bit along and reminding me it's a comedy because of just how I just remember the show being like loud and big and like and I couldn't really pinpoint it. But now I'm like, oh yeah, it was all these sound effects and it was all the composing on the show that really did that. So good. I mean, every episode was a composed score. Another thing Linwood was doing was sitting down. We interviewed Charlie Sidnor and talked to him about how every episode was composed. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, and that was the first single camera show I ever worked on. So I just thought, oh, that's the way they do it. But there isn't. It's like
no.
most other shows. It's like, okay, let's put the emotional music cue in here, or let's put the important thing is being said music cue here. And you've got like a bank of like 15 or 20 cues, and that's it. So yeah, that was another reason that post-production went so long past when we finished shooting and bled into the next season. That was part of the reason, because it took so long to just come up with all these music cues. I had no idea that was not the way things were normally that worked on other shows. I just thought every show did that. Yeah.
What a show.
Seriously.
What a damn show. Thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time to talk to us. This is so cool. I mean, we could ask you, we're only on season 3, as we said, of the rewatch. And I feel like as we go along, we'll just have more and more questions about stuff. So we might hit you up again.
It would be fun to have you on, especially when we get to the episodes that you directed, which is season 5 and 6.
No, that was the last season, actually.
Okay.
Both of them. Okay.
Yeah, I was so glad Linwood told you about the thing where he and I were dancing in the back of the prom scene. But he got wrong why we did it. The reason we did it was that was the second to last episode of the series, and I was on set with the director, and Linwood was around because he was prepping for the finale. So he just happened to be around when he heard, we did a couple takes of that thing, and the camera booms up out of the kids dancing to see the whole gymnasium. And I thought we had it, and the director wanted to go again. And I said, "Why? We got it." And he goes, "Well, this thing was going on in the very back of the room, and it just didn't look right." And I just said, "No one's ever going to notice that. I think we could go again." And he was digging in. It's like, "All right, okay, we'll go again. We'll waste time arguing about it." So Linwood overheard that, and he comes over and he goes, "Come on." And so then he dragged me back there, and we walked around the back of the set and crouched down. And then when they yelled action, we popped up and we're dancing. And it was just really to prove a point
That's
that, yeah, no one's
so
going to notice
funny.
it. And so the editor, the director, who's a great director, but he never noticed it. No one noticed it. And I'm actually wearing a baseball cap. So it's like I'm the only person at the prom wearing a baseball cap. And
Totally,
so,
totally.
yeah, but nobody noticed it.
That's
So
awesome.
that's a nice little Easter egg. I love that.
So
You know, something we forgot to ask Linwood about, and we can ask you, is the titles of the episodes.
Oh yeah.
Who decided those, and what? They seem so.
It's so weird where it's like sometimes it's like red dress. It's like, okay, it's about a red dress. Bowling, it's about
Yeah.
bowling. And then it's like
Yeah.
old Mrs. Old.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. They're
They're
specific and not at the same time. It's so interesting.
I think he was trying to one thing he really wanted to do, because he was all about trying to simplify his life as much as possible, because his bandwidth was just stretched very thin. So he didn't want, a lot of shows do super cryptic, overly clever titles, and he didn't want to have to be doing that math every time somebody brought up an episode. It's just like somebody brings up red dress. Okay, I know exactly what episode we're talking about.
Totally.
And so he wanted the episode to immediately come to mind from the title. But sometimes, yeah, like Old Mrs. Old, that was Malcolm having to deal with that old lady and all the shit that went down. Here's another little Easter egg that Linwood actually alluded to in one of his social media posts about the revival. In Old Mrs. Old, this lady's horrible and keeps making Malcolm do horrible shit, and he's kind of an indentured servant because he broke her window or whatever. And she makes him put lotion on her feet. And so Linwood, they went out and so they needed some horrible old lady feet that he's got to put lotion on. So it's just as bad as you could imagine. So they hired a foot double, and Linwood comes in the writer's room and he goes, "All right, that foot double's not going to work. Who's got ugly feet?" And I made the mistake of saying, "Not me." And so he goes, "All right, you're it." And so he made me go to the makeup trailer and take my shoes off. And I was in there for like 2 hours while they put warts and bunions on my feet. And when I walked in, the makeup people, I took my shoes off and they said, "Why are you here? This is going to take forever." And it's not like I have lovely feet, but they're not grotesque. And then when I got there, they took me to set, I saw the lady who was the foot double, and her feet were incredibly disturbing. And I think that might have been the problem, is like Linwood just said, "This is too much. People are going to vomit if they see those
Holy
feet."
shit.
Yeah. So my feet are in that episode, and
That's your feet.
Yeah, but I'm glad they didn't. It would have been even weirder than it already was if Frankie had to do it, but they had his stand-in do it. So it's just some kid I didn't even know. But it was still uncomfortable, and Linwood loved how uncomfortable I was. That's hilarious. It just delighted him.
It's also funny to imagine the woman, the foot stand-in. Like, she already has disturbing feet, and she's like, "Well, finally, I'm getting hired for a show where I can showcase my disturbing feet." And they're like, "Your feet are actually too disturbing for our character, where you have disturbing feet."
I don't know what they told her. I'm sure they didn't tell her that, but she did look kind of disappointed. When I passed her, she was just kind of leaning against the wall, like, I thought I was gonna be. I thought they were gonna use my feet.
I mean, you don't get to get a foot rub. I mean, it sucks.
Yes. I would have gladly let her do it instead of me.
Jeez, that is so funny. Wow. What a good note to end on here. Again, thank you, Alex. We
Yeah.
are obviously huge fans of your work, and
Thank you. You're doing the
and
Lord's work here, keeping this show out there in the
definitely.
world.
I feel like we're learning how to frame by frame recreate this show because we're talking to every single possible person.
Well, you should, if you haven't, you should talk to Al Higgins because, like I said, he really did bring
Yep.
a lot.
He's on the
to
list.
show.
He is
Okay.
on the list for sure.
All right.
Anything
Yeah,
else?
seriously. I mean, thanks a lot for being here. It means a lot. Yeah, I would hope to have you on in the future. And
Yeah,
All
open
right,
invite
just reach out.
anytime. Maybe you could talk about one of the episodes you directed because we are supposed to do. I mean, we're watching the show. We've been doing so many interviews that we haven't watched an episode from the show in a while, but we need to get back to that.
Yeah, well, the first one I did, we won't get into it now, but I'm as proud of that episode as anything I directed. I really loved that episode. And
So
I
cool.
didn't even know what I was doing. It was my first episode, but
Right.
I'm really proud of it. So
It's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Alex.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Can you repeat? Well, life is unfair.